So back again talking about comfort and convenience. Last time, for part one, was talking about the chair and sitting. So check out that video if you haven't seen that yet. This week we're going to be talking about the shoe or the trainer or whatever you put on your feet and the importance of selecting the right type of shoe for you. And this is a little bit tricky because it really depends on how long you've been wearing that type of shoe, so how old you are, and what your kind of environment is like. Obviously there are some practicalities about the types of shoe you need to wear. So walking into the city with barefoot might not be the great idea. But obviously try and take away the message here, which is again talking about adaptation and also a kind of an awareness of how we're sold of certain technology and marketing tools that make us feel like we need something when perhaps we don't. So there is a movement, and it has been going for a while now, about more barefoot or minimal footwear. So if you're more interested in that, then Google minimal footwear or barefoot technology, and you'll come up with loads of different options. So I'll put in the description below maybe some links to some well-recognized minimal or barefoot type of manufacturers. So effectively the foot has nearly 30 bones in it, and they need to, or a little bit like your hand, need to move independently to be able to be malleable. And the foot and the heel is padded to allow foot strike to dissipate forces through the body before it hits your skull effectively. It's constantly, your nervous system when you're wearing barefoot is feeling for the environment. It's there to give you a feedback system to whether it's hot, cold, sharp, bony, stony, whether or not it's unstable, whether it's wet, whether it's icy. The more in tune your senses are to its environment, the more choice you have to know whether or not the environment needs to be altered or not, if that makes sense. So like I was saying about the chair analogy, if the chair or something is too comfortable, then we're unlikely to move from that position too often, and not moving creates a problem. So if you look at the history of the shoe, going way back, we've always had some kind of cover. The moccasin, the Japanese and the Chinese would all have some kind of thin leather sole, but it would always be a soft, wide shoe that would allow the foot to move. And quite often our shoes are very restrictive. So the foot and toes need to fundamentally need to be able to spread like so. And quite often if you look at a shoe like this, it's very narrow, so your feet get crunched up like that, and then they can't spread to stabilize. Then a little bit like a spider's web, if you tug on one side, the other side moves. If your toes are rigid in here, then that has a knock-on effect to your ankle and your biomechanics. I won't go on to detail there, but trust me, it has an effect of the rest of the chain, if you like. So the feet need to be able to spread. You need to be able to feel the floor, and quite often if something is rigid and it's quite hard to move, how are those bones going to move independently? So what happens is over time, though, if you don't use something, you lose it, so they become immobile, and that's where the big toe becomes stiff, the joint becomes stiff, so we start to lose flexion in our big toe. We start to lose flexion and all different types of mobility in the bones around and in the foot and the ankle. Then we start getting sort of mobility issues in the calves, flexibility, tightness in the calf and the hamstrings, because we're constantly trying to adapt to this inability to move. So the body needs to be able to feel the floor, detect what's going on. And in fact, what they've done, recent studies have suggested that these kind of thick soles, and I grabbed one of my teenager boys' sole. Now check that sole out, it's obviously dirty. But if you consider how heavy that is, actually it's quite wide, so it's not too bad. But because it's so heavy, it's actually really quite rigid though. The sole is so thick. What they've saying is like these Nike Air and these cushioned shoes that give you a lift. what they've done under force plate is they've shown that the more cushioning a shoe has, the more impact and more force goes through the body, because fundamentally, in order for the nervous system to detect what's going on, it has to put more pressure through its surface to start to feel any kind of sensory feedback. So in essence, when we start to wear thick shoes, overpronator shoes, then effectively that starts to take away our body's ability to correct and give the feedback system enough information. So the other thing to recognize is the lift on shoes. This, as you can see, is a kind of like almost this is a bit excessive. If you draw a line through there, it's almost an inch or so of heel lift. And what that does is it alters our biomechanics. It tightens our calves and our Achilles. So over time, we get tight calves and Achilles. And then when we go to squat or bend down, we adapt and we have to move. We're moving out of position because actually we haven't got mobility in the ankle. And you'll find this with women who wear heels, and especially high heels, as they start to get really tight calves, and it affects their spinal position and their pelvic position, and that creates back issues. So whether something really looks good and gives you function really has been sold to us by marketing companies that tell us that we need these things. Like overpronator shoes, runners that have flat feet. Well, if you look at it and you assess it biomechanically, the foot is a product of other issues going on. So it's kind of what we call a slave joint. So normally you'll find if somebody overpronates or has something biomechanically going on, it's because they lack stability, proprioception, so their awareness. They lack something else in their chain, which is creating overpronation. So it could be they have a weak core muscles, it could be the tight hip, it could be tight calves, or it could be they're wearing shoes that are too rigid or healed over time, and that creates this kind of internal or pronation in the foot. So the solution is, I believe, and I've been wearing this type of thing, they're all dirty, aren't they, because it's winter. But this is a Vivo or Vivo, and the good thing about this is they're very soft and squidgy. There's no heel lift on the end, so you're looking for shoes that have a minimal lift. You want a wide shoe which allows your toes to spread and effectively feel the floor. I've had these for probably about 10 years now. They're a little bit skanky, but as you can see, they allow your toes to spread. And it's obviously just like walking on the floor. It's just really a rubber sole here. So what I would say is my suggestions would be, depending on how long you've been in these kind of rigid shoes, because your body and your biomechanics are going to be adapted to that particular type of shoe. If you're 40 years plus, I wouldn't jump straight into a barefoot shoe or even something like this, because your body's not going to be able to cope with it. You have to start to kind of ease yourself into it so that your body has a chance to adapt to this new environment. So the next time you go and buy a pair of shoes, rather than think about what it looks like, you need to be thinking of how rigid they are, how wide they are, what the heel lift is like, and see if you can buy something which is a little bit less with a heel, a little bit wider, a little bit lighter, something that moves a bit more. And there are, as time goes on and innovation goes on, there are companies like Vivo that are now bringing out stuff which is a bit more socially acceptable, because I can tell you from experience that people look at you a bit funny in the supermarket when you're wearing this stuff, but hey, I don't really care. So I just thought I'd talk to you a little bit about the shoe and things to look out for, because it does make a big difference to your biomechanics, to your posture, to your well-being, if you can make better decisions based on evolution rather than marketing power. All right, I'm going to be doing another video soon. Not sure what it's going to be, but it's going to be on the same sort of vibe as convenience and comfort. And hopefully you won't get to the point where you're in pain because you have too much comfort around you. See you soon. Take care.